Welcome to a Life Under Construction podcast. I'm your host, Rhoda Daniel. Thank you for tuning in today. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or watching on YouTube, I'm extremely grateful to have you join me today. I hope you had a good week, and I hope that listening to this podcast makes your week even better because we will be diving deep into the topic of emotions. Emotions are good, emotions are essential, but I think all of us can attest to the fact that we have often got ourselves into trouble because we have been led by our emotions. We have all said things in anger that we regret. We have said no to opportunities because of fear or anxiety. We have let ourselves be overwhelmed with sadness to the point that we have not been able to get out of bed in the morning. Emotions are good, emotions are essential, but when we let our emotions lead our lives, they tend to overwhelm us and they tend to lead us down paths that we shouldn't actually be going down. So, what do? Do we completely ignore our emotions and live a very logical existence? Or is there a balance that we can strike? And if there is, what is that balance and how do we achieve it? The first thing to be conscious of is the fact that feelings are deceptive. Feelings are dependent on our state of mind. In that particular moment, it is dependent on our hormones, it is dependent on how much sleep we've had. I don't think it is reliable enough for us to base our response on our feelings. But we often do that, don't we? We react to life situations, we react to people based on how we are feeling. But the minute we are conscious of the fact that feelings can be deceptive, that it depends on so many variables, I think we become more in control of our feelings. We do need to realize that between something happening to us and our response to that thing, there is a gap where we can choose how we want to respond. Viktor Frankl says it very beautifully. He says that between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. We are usually people who respond instantly. Something happens and so we react. Someone says something and so we react. We get some bad news and so we react. We don't use that space in between to choose a response more appropriately. But how many times have we said things in anger to someone and regretted it later on? How many times have we done things in the moment, feeling some kind of way, and then looked back and wondered why we did it? How many times have we been overwhelmed by emotion and feelings and have let that dictate how we have behaved with people? The minute we accept the fact that feelings can be deceptive, that just because we are feeling something doesn't mean that it is true, we give ourselves back that power to choose our reactions. We sometimes say that we're just humans. Of course, we're going to react. Of course, we're going to get upset. Of course, we're going to behave according to our feelings. But that's just an excuse because being human actually means that we have a mind that can filter our feelings. It can filter our emotions. It can filter situations based on fact versus feelings. So, being human actually means that we are in a better position to respond rather than react because animals react. Animals feel fear and they attack. Animals feel pain and they attack. They just react to a situation because they do not have the capacity to think, they do not have the capacity to filter anything through their minds, and so they just react to the situation. As humans, we have our brains gifted to us, which we need to use, especially in these situations, because when we are overwhelmed by emotion, we tend to make wrong decisions. We tend to make decisions that we regret later on. We tend to make decisions that impair and break relationships. If we know that feelings are deceptive, if we know that we have the freedom to choose our response, I think we need to exercise that freedom in order to have better relationships with the people around us, in order to have better control over our own minds and our own peace of mind. Feelings are also deceptive because they are often based on a narrative we tell ourselves. We have the story running in our mind and we feel things based on that story. This is why it's important to understand that feelings and emotions are actually a little bit different. Emotions originate as sensations in the body. Feelings are influenced by our emotions but are generated from our thoughts. For example, when we enter a room where there are all new people, maybe we walked into an event where there are all new people, most of us will feel that pit in our stomach, those butterflies, when we enter into a new situation. Someone who is more shy or introverted, who does not like social situations, would interpret that pit in their stomach as anxiety or fear. And so they walk into that room with that anxiety or that fear, which is a feeling. Someone who is more comfortable in social situations, someone who loves social situations, would interpret that same pit in the stomach, those same butterflies, as excitement for what is to come. Same situation, same emotion, different feeling. If feelings are based on the stories we tell ourselves, then if we change the stories, we can change our feelings. I have actually tried this out in my own life. I never liked change, I never liked new situations. I always was scared, fearful, had anxiety. I always had that pit in my stomach to the 100th degree anytime I was faced with a new situation. And therefore, I never tried out a lot of new things out of that fear. One year I decided that I've had enough of that. I've had enough of fear controlling my life, fear not allowing me to step into new opportunities. And I decided that I'm going to say yes to every opportunity that came my way. I still felt the fear, I still felt the anxiety every time I had to do something new. I think that that was the year I also started speaking in public a lot more, which was something that doesn't come naturally to me. But I had this statement that I would tell myself. I would say, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I kept repeating that to myself. That was the story I told myself, that it's okay, you are going to feel the fear, but you're still going to do it. And because of that, my feelings changed. The emotion did not change. Till date, if I'm set to go on stage, I have those butterflies, I have that anxiety. I cannot eat before a public event, but I feel the fear and I do it anyway. And that has changed my narrative in my own mind, and that has changed my feelings because I go into situations with anticipation and excitement rather than with fear and anxiety. That is the power of our mind. So, if we can actually control our feelings by changing the narrative in our own mind, just imagine how powerful we are. But we have never thought about this. We have never thought because we have always been told or always seen that feelings and emotions control us and not the other way around. But it is fact that we can control our emotions. It just takes a little bit of effort to do that. Effort to accept the fact that feelings are deceptive, effort to accept the fact that maybe the narrative we told in our own minds is messing with our own feelings. We also can change the narrative by even using our own imagination and being more empathetic to other people. For example, if you are driving in traffic and someone cuts you off, our natural reaction is to start probably cursing that person for cutting you off, for driving in that way, for endangering the lives of people. That is our natural reaction. But if we knew that there was a pregnant woman in the back seat who was having labor pains and they were rushing to the hospital to have that baby delivered, doesn't that change your reaction? Of course it would, because you know the explanation of why that person is behaving that way. I think sometimes we need to use that gap between stimulus and our response to find out why someone is behaving a certain way so that we can react accordingly. Sometimes we don't need to do that. We have our imagination to actually think and imagine why someone is behaving a certain way, and give them a little more grace in that moment. Not assume that they intend to hurt you or intend to harm you or intend to anger you, but assume that they are good inherently, and maybe, just maybe, they are going through a bad day. Maybe they had something going on in their lives and therefore they are talking in this way. I think when we use our empathy and our imagination together, we protect ourselves from reacting in a way that we will regret later. It also protects our own energy, because how much time have we wasted in our emotions, in our feelings, being angry, being upset, being sad. The other person might not even know that you are upset. The other person might not even care that you are upset. But we sit with those emotions, we sit with those feelings, and we torture ourselves when we can actually choose to just let certain things go. We can choose to reframe the narrative that we have built in our mind. We can choose a different feeling or a different emotion that is much more appropriate for the situation. As I said earlier, as humans, we have the ability to control our emotions and not let our emotions control us. But oftentimes, we unfortunately walk through life the other way around. We let our emotions control us. We are walking through life, and anything and everything can trigger us in an instant. And I don't think that's the best way to go through life. That's a very unstable way to go through life, because you never know what's going to trigger you if you are letting your emotions control you. Your days can get away from you if you let your emotions control you. I've had days where one small thing in the morning, one person saying one thing in a certain tone, has affected me for the rest of the day and has destroyed my entire day, just because I interpreted what they said in a certain way and then got upset by it, and then let that feeling of being upset affect my mood and then my entire day. But I've also had days where I've had a situation where I should have been upset, where I should have been angry. But in that moment, I was like, I don't have time for this. I honestly do not have time for this. And I chose different. I chose to let it go. I chose to release that emotion and move on with my life. And sometimes that's all it takes, because I cannot change the other person. I cannot change the situation, but I can control my emotion and my reaction to the situation. And I can ensure that my day is not spoiled because of someone else. When you take back that control, when you take back that power, that is the power to choose that Viktor Frankl is talking about. And that power is with all of us. It's not only with me, it's with you as well. There are two things that we need to have if we are committed to controlling our emotions. The first is self awareness. We need to be conscious of what our emotions are. We need to know what our emotions are, what we are feeling. We need to sit with those emotions sometimes. We need to be able to observe ourselves and see what we are feeling and why we are feeling them. Self awareness is important because sometimes we are not even conscious that there is a particular emotion that is dominant in our life. For example, anger. I know people who have very vehemently said that I don't get angry, but everyone around them is going to say that they get angry. It has become such a normalized part of their lives that they don't see it anymore. So, if you do not see your own emotions that are dominating you, that are controlling your life or leading your life, ask people around you, ask people you love and trust about what do they think, which are the emotions that are controlling you, and there'll usually be certain dominant ones. So be aware of those, and then be aware of what triggers those, because sometimes there are certain things that can be avoided. For example, I'm someone who, if I don't sleep, I am not a very nice person. I am very vulnerable to emotions if I have not slept, whether it is anger, whether it is sadness. If I have not slept, I am so vulnerable to every single trigger in this world. And so I'm very conscious that I need to sleep, or I'm very conscious that I don't get into conflict when I have had less sleep, because that is not the best time to have certain discussions. So be aware of what your triggers are. You might be someone who gets hangry. When you're hungry, you get angry. So be conscious of that and ensure that you are feeding yourself at proper intervals so that you don't take out your frustration on other people. When we are conscious of ourselves, we can then self-correct. We can then conduct ourselves in a better way. So once we are aware of our emotions, the second thing is restraint, self-restraint, being able to control our emotions. And that is where some of you might be saying, okay, I know I'm an angry person, but in the moment, I can't control my anger. In the moment, I don't know what takes over me and I just react. Again, between stimulus and response, there is a gap, there is a space. I think sometimes we need to create that space through actual space, actual time, because we need that time to process. We need that space to calm ourselves down. So it could mean actually walking away from a situation to calm yourself down. It could be asking the other person to give you some time to process what they have just said rather than reacting immediately. So create that space if you find yourself overwhelmed by emotion, because when you are overwhelmed by emotion, you don't think clearly. You aren't able to think clearly, and you need that time and space to be able to respond accordingly. With practice, this becomes easier. The more you do it, the more easier it becomes. And one thing to always remember is always act better than you feel. You don't necessarily need to act exactly how you feel. It's not faking it, it's just being a better human being, because we are conscious enough to know that maybe I'm feeling bad today, maybe I'm feeling angry today, maybe I'm feeling upset today, but that does not mean that I need to show that anger to someone else, especially someone else who's not even involved in the situation. But even to someone who is involved in the situation, I think we have the ability to act better than we feel. And anytime you find yourself in a situation where you feel something, always remember this, because you will protect the relationships with other people in this process. Most of the time, we react with the people we love the most, the people closest to us, and those are the relationships that are actually important to us. So when we react rather than respond, we are causing little cracks in those relationships. And I know some people say, I react with people I love because who else am I going to react with? But you are still causing cracks in that relationship. You're still saying things that may still linger for years to come. You are still saying things that may impact the other person. Yes, they will forgive you because they love you, but there are still things that were said that could have been avoided. If you truly love someone, if you really care for them, you will be careful with what you say to them. If we know that we can control our emotions, if we know that we can take that space and respond rather than react, why wouldn't we do that? I believe being able to tame our emotions gives us the freedom to live the life that we were created to live. I hope that all of you want that. I hope that all of you want a peaceful existence, good relationships. And if you want that, then it all starts with managing your emotions, and that is called being emotionally intelligent. I continue to hope and pray that all of you listening would be able to operate in that freedom that controlling your emotions, taming your emotions gives you, and be able to live an abundant life. We have only one life. Let's make it a good one. If you want to continue this conversation and talk more about emotions and how to control them, you can write to us at alifeunderconstruction.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at alifeunderconstruction. Thank you for listening, and I will meet you again next week with another topic that will help you live the life you were meant to live.